So you can say, what about the problem of evil? Why is there the basic argument for the problem of evil is if there's a triple O God. A triple O God is a God who is omnipotent, all powerful, omniscient, all knowing, and omnibenevolent, all good. So if God knows everything, he knows people are suffering. If God is all good, he wants to stop people suffering. If God is all powerful, he can stop people suffering. And but that he doesn't. Therefore, there cannot be a God who's all good, all knowing, and all powerful. That's the argument. So what do we do with that argument? So what we do with that argument is, and what I'm, and I think our answer to that is, it's a philosophical response. It's not a doctrinal response like our good book says. It's not a mystery. It's not like Job in the Bible where, well, you just can't figure this one out. You're not God, and you can't figure this one out. Well, we would, first of all, in our tradition, we have a big advantage to deal with this specific problem. Not only our tradition, but actually in many Indo-European, philosophies, and that is the idea of reincarnation. Because if you accept that there's an eternal soul within a body, and if you accept that God is all good, it practically it's logically required that there be reincarnation because, listen, you have a child and your child is misbehaving. You don't give up on your child. You may give a suitable punishment. You don't want to spoil your child. Child has to know the relationship between misbehavior and punishment because otherwise children that are spoiled go out into the real world when their parents end it there and basically become dysfunctional or criminals because they don't understand that you can't just do whatever you want. So letting kids do whatever they want is a great way to destroy their lives. And in fact, what child psychology shows is that the best parents bring two things to their parenting: love, they really love their children, and they bring boundaries. If you love your child, there's no boundaries, you're going to get a loved monster. And if you bring boundaries but no love, you know what that leads to. So from God's point of view, there are boundaries. There are consequences. There have to be consequences, or you can never raise someone to be a good person. But God doesn't give up. How could a human being be more patient and merciful than God? I know myself in terms of my own feelings. Let's say someone is misbehaving, someone I care about, and then they die. I wish for that person another chance. I would like for that person to have another life to try again. Anyone you love, you want them to get another chance. So how could we be more merciful than God? If God is infinitely merciful, and he's not, he doesn't really fit the bill. If you say this is God, but he's not infinitely merciful, I think, will the real God please stand up? John Stuart Mill, the English philosopher, said, how can I worship a God who is morally inferior to so many human beings? So, if God is merciful, if you're an eternal soul, and God puts you in this virtual reality machine, a material body, let you take your best shot at being foolish in the material world, but he's trying to educate you, and you didn't make it, no social promotion, so you got to take the course again. But that's what happens. It's like, if you have a child in school and the child flunks, you don't kill the child. Child has to repeat the course. And that's all reincarnation is. It means if you flunk, you've got to take the course again. No social promotions. It's just simple. And so if you consider that we're eternal souls and bodies, and then God is infinitely merciful. He says, well, just keep trying, I'll help you, but sooner or later you're going to get it. But why is there suffering? Because we sometimes deserve it. Take, for example, Hitler. You can use Hitler as a good example because it's very unlikely when you're talking to people, someone's going to think he was a good person. So if you take Hitler and let's say he reincarnated, Okay, maybe use some cute baby. That's little baby Hitler. I mean, so if that baby suffered in some way, oh, there cannot be a God. That poor little baby suffered. So I'm not saying every baby that suffers was Hitler in their last life. I'm just saying that if it's a fact that we have past lives, then it is possible that our suffering and enjoyment, that we caused it, that we ourselves caused it. Now, someone could say, even if we did, I can't believe anyone could do anything so bad as to, let's say, like be tortured, for example, to give like a sort of gruesome example. But there are torturers all over the place, especially in some parts of the world. I mean, take the Islamic State. I mean, there's, thousands of people who, happily torture others. And so to say that human beings could never do anything to deserve that kind of punishment, well, it happens all the time. Then you could say, well, but still, how could God do that? We have to remember something. We're not the body. And so if you remember that we're not the body, we're actually eternal souls. No soul in the history of the universe has ever actually been injured or killed. The body is. And so then the question is, well, what is the body? And as an old friend of mine who passed away, who was a great scientist, actually, is Vaputa, he said that it's a virtual reality machine. It's a virtual reality machine. I mean, I remember one time I went to Universal, or I can't remember. I grew up in LA, so I got kind of sick of Disneyland by my high school grad night. And I was like, I can't take it anymore. But anyway, but now they have all kinds of new things they didn't have back then. So, but I remember we went on one rocket ride where, everyone knew it's a ride. It's a Disneyland ride. And at one point, you're about to crash into some planet and everyone's ducking. Everyone's like screaming and ducking. It's like a virtual reality experience. So and what I'm saying does not trivialize human suffering. It doesn't like, hey, you're not your body. So what if you just like, lost a dear one, or you just, suffer some horrible accident, forget about it, man, grow up. You're not your body. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. People are attached to their body and they do suffer terribly because they falsely take themselves to be the body, and it's real suffering. I mean, even if suffering is based on a mistake, which this is, it's still real suffering. I mean, imagine, for example, someone that gets terrible news that their child died in an automobile accident. The parents are grieving, and then they get another call. Whoops, sorry, wrong kid. Your child's here, safe, sound. So the fact is that when the parents believe they've lost their child, I mean, it's real suffering. They're really suffering, even though it's based on a mistake. So we're not trivializing human suffering. In fact, that's why Krishna says so often in the Bhagavad Gita, you cannot ultimately achieve love of God if you don't care about other souls. And you have statements also in the Bhagavatam like that, where, I mean, of course, Jesus said it very beautifully, love your neighbor as yourself. It's interesting. I mean, one thing I most admire about the teachings of Jesus, I have to say, is that he took all these laws. There was this huge corpus of Jewish law. And by the way, that's what they meant by saying you can't, achieve God by works. They didn't mean you don't have to do good things in the world. They meant you don't have to follow all these technical rules. But anyway, so in all these different books of the Old Testament, there are all these laws, and they're very elaborate, complicated, and technical. And then Jesus said there's actually two laws. If you just follow those two laws, you did it. You're okay. And he didn't make these things up. He was actually quoting from the Old Testament. And he said, love God with all your heart, soul, and might. Love your neighbor as yourself. And if you think about it, that's a complete program. If anything, we would say, and Jesus didn't deny this, he just didn't say it, but that your neighbors are not just human. Your neighbors are not just human. You have, neighbors in other species. Because after all, I mean, consider this. I'll give you a very short, simple argument for animal rights, which I think is logically sound. And that is, if God created all creatures, and if a particular creature, like let's say a mammal, like a horse or a pig or a cow or whatever, if a particular creature can feel pleasure and pain, real pleasure and pain, can feel fear, even terror, as in fact animals can. Anyone that's ever like bred horses or dogs, I mean, you know that animals can feel really intense emotions. They can be terrified, they can be happy, they can feel real pain, agony, and so on. So if God created this capacity to experience pleasure and pain, how could God not care about their pleasure and pain? How could God create, let's say, a dog with the capacity to feel pain and then be completely indifferent when the dog does feel pain? Because if God had not made the dog that way, the dog wouldn't feel pain. God created that vulnerability, you could say. And so how could God, if God created all creatures and in more developed creatures, a real capacity for pleasure and pain, how could God be indifferent if I cause pain to a creature? And of course, in America, we have this wonderful schizophrenic law system. Like I remember that years ago, there was a quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons who was like having mistreating dogs. Remember that? Like dog fights and killing dogs, and the whole country was outraged. And he went to prison. He went to prison. He did hard time. And you get all these people, you know, talking about how bad it is over their steak dinner, and they didn't see any contradiction there. The fact is, they're eating food which was obtained by horrible brutality to a creature equally conscious, equally conscious, and yet they just don't see the connection. It's interesting because in the Western world, animals don't have rights unless they make cute urban pets. They make cute urban pets. So if you can emotionally bond with a creature because it makes a good urban pet. I mean, a cow makes a nice pet, but on a farm, not in an apartment or house. And so if you think about the philosophy of law, the worst kind of government, or political philosophy, the worst kind of government is where people themselves have no rights, but you live or die at the whim of a tyrant. It's like in the Roman Colosseum, the emperor would say, live or die. You don't have a right. You don't have any intrinsic rights. The rights are not on you. If the tyrant, for whatever whim, feels like it, you die or you live. Whereas in civilized law, the right is in the person himself or herself. And so no matter what the ruler may think, the ruler must follow the law. The ruler must respect your legitimate rights, whatever their particular mood swing may be that day. Now, in the case of American law toward non-humans, it's the bad kind of law, that a creature's rights emanate not from the fact that creature is conscious, can feel pain and fear and happiness, but it's just the whim of the lawmaker. It's just the whim of the lawmaker. We like dogs. Dogs have rights. We don't find cows to be so cute. They have no rights. Or horses. I mean, the French, this is kind of really disgusting, but they actually breed horses as meat. I mean, they have, sorry, don't want to gross you out, but so therefore, why do animals have rights? Because God gave them the capacity to feel pleasure and pain, and therefore you are morally responsible for causing pain to any creature. If you cause pain unnecessarily, you unnecessarily cause pain, suffering to another creature, how can you not be responsible for that? I have to say, this is just me now. One thing which is just, I don't think I'll ever really understand, and that is you see people fishing. And when the fish comes out, it couldn't be more obvious. The fish is in agony. That's why they're squirming on the hook. I mean, they just got a hook through their mouth and they're desperately thrashing about, dying, and people, wow, that's a good, wholesome sport. I mean, to have such and it's very popular. It's a very popular sport all over the world. To have a sport which is so popular based on obvious agony is something which it's just kind of beyond me. I mean, it's just something I can't quite figure out because it's right there in front of your face. The agony, the suffering is right there in front of you, and you just don't see it. So to enjoy someone else's agony, to enjoy someone else's suffering, it's a very strange notion of happiness.